What if the reason your hydrangea keeps losing its blooms has nothing to do with fertilizer and nothing to do with the weather? Most people see brown leaves or a plant that grows huge and green but refuses to flower, and they panic. They think they killed it. They think they don't have a green thumb. But here's the truth. Hydrangeas are actually forgiving plants. The problem is that most people were never taught how hydrangeas actually work when they bloom, why they bloom, and what quietly shuts that process down. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which of 7 hidden causes is affecting your plant, and more importantly, exactly what to do about it. And stick around, because reason number 6 is the one almost nobody suspects. It can wipe out an entire year of blooms without a single leaf ever looking sick. Let's fix your hydrangea. Reason 1. You're pruning at the wrong time. Here's a scene a lot of you know well. Fall comes around, the garden looks messy, so you grab your shears and tidy everything up, including the hydrangea. Most people believe this is basic garden hygiene. Cut back the old growth, keep things neat, and the plant will reward you in spring. But here's the surprising part for many hydrangeas. That one afternoon of tidying up is the exact reason nothing blooms next summer. Here's what most people never realize. A lot of hydrangea varieties, the classic mophead and lacecap types, don't grow this year's flowers. They grow next year's flowers, starting in late summer, and then they simply hold on to those buds through winter like a gift wrapped and waiting. When you prune in fall or late winter, you're not cleaning up old growth. You're cutting off the flowers that were already forming. Think of it like this. The plant already did its homework for next year. You just erased it. The fix is refreshingly simple. Prune spent blooms right after they finish flowering in summer, not in fall, not in early spring. If you're not sure which type you have, wait until you see where new leaves emerge in spring. Then only trim the parts that stayed bare. Healthy blooms next year start with the pruning shears staying in the shed this fall. Now, pruning timing explains a lot of no flowers cases. But what about hydrangeas that are actually struggling, wilting, browning, looking sick? That's a different problem entirely, and it starts with something everyone assumes is helpful. Reason 2: too much direct sun. Picture this. You plant your hydrangea in the sunniest spot in the yard because, well, plants need sun. Right? That sounds helpful, doesn't it? Actually, for hydrangeas, that instinct is often backwards. Hydrangeas are woodland plants by nature. In the wild, they grow at the edge of forests, under the dappled light filtering through taller trees, not out in the open under a blazing afternoon sun. Here's what's actually happening inside the plant. Big hydrangea leaves are basically giant solar panels, and giant solar panels lose a lot of water through evaporation. When the afternoon sun hits directly, the plant loses water faster than the roots can pull it back up. So it wilts, not because it's dying, but because it's protecting itself, the same way you'd squint and step back from a fire that's too close. Do this enough afternoons in a row, and the stress adds up. Leaf edges scorch. Buds abort. The plant stops investing energy in flowers because it's too busy just trying to survive the heat. The fix: give your hydrangea morning sun and afternoon shade. If it's already planted in a scorching spot, a taller companion plant or even a shade cloth for the hottest weeks of summer can undo months of stress. Hydrangeas don't want more sun. They want the right sun. That's stress from too much light. But there's an opposite kind of stress happening underground. And it's even easier to miss because it hides in something you're doing to be helpful. Reason 3: you're overwatering the roots. Most people believe that if a hydrangea looks droopy, it needs more water, so they water again. And again, this is where almost everyone gets it wrong. Roots aren't just straws that suck up water, they're also breathing. Roots need oxygen from tiny air pockets in the soil. When soil stays soaked constantly, those air pockets fill with water, and the roots essentially start to suffocate. Think of the soil as the plant's refrigerator. A refrigerator needs airflow to keep things fresh. Fill it completely with water, and everything inside starts to rot instead of staying preserved. That's exactly what happens to roots sitting in waterlogged soil. They rot, and rotted roots can't deliver water or nutrients anywhere, which ironically makes the plant look thirsty even though it's drowning. The fix is a simple habit change, not a bigger watering can. Water deeply, but only when the top 2 inches of soil are dry to the touch. And check your drainage. If water pools for more than a few minutes after rain, that spot is working against you no matter how carefully you water. Overwatering doesn't just fail to help, it actively destroys the very roots that would have produced next year's blooms. Now here's the twist: sometimes the opposite habit causes a nearly identical problem, and it's the one most people don't expect. Reason 4: shallow, frequent watering instead of deep watering. Here's a habit that feels responsible. A quick 5-minute sprinkle every single day so the plant never gets thirsty. At first, this seems helpful. But that's exactly why the roots stay weak. Roots are the plant's pantry. They grow toward wherever resources are, and only as far as they need to. If water always shows up in the top inch of soil, roots have zero reason to grow deeper. They stay shallow, fragile, and completely exposed to every hot afternoon and dry spell. Deep, infrequent watering does the opposite. It forces roots to chase moisture downward, building a deeper, sturdier root system that can support real flower production. Because remember, flowers are expensive for a plant to produce. A shallow-rooted hydrangea simply doesn't have the resources to spare. The fix: water less often, but more thoroughly enough to soak the top 6 to 8 inches of soil, then let it dry out before watering again. A layer of mulch around the base helps lock that moisture in and keeps roots cooler at the same time. Deep roots create deep reserves. Deep reserves create blooms. We've covered light and water, but there's a third culprit hiding in something most people pour on generously, believing it's the ultimate fix for a struggling plant. Reason 5: too much nitrogen fertilizer. If your hydrangea has huge, glossy, beautiful leaves and almost no flowers, this next one is probably why. Most people see a weak-looking plant and reach for fertilizer, assuming more nutrients always means more blooms. But here's the real problem: not all nutrients do the same job. Nitrogen-heavy fertilizers, the kind meant to green up a lawn, tell a plant to prioritize leaf and stem growth. It's like giving a plant a bigger house instead of the paycheck it needs to actually furnish it with flowers. When the plant senses abundant nitrogen, it essentially thinks, "Conditions are great for growing bigger. I don't need to rush into reproducing yet." Flower production quietly takes a back seat to leafy growth. The fix is switching to a fertilizer specifically balanced for blooming, something lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus and potassium, and only feeding once or twice a season, not every time you water. Stop feeding size. Start feeding blooms. Now here's the reason almost nobody suspects. Because it doesn't leave a single mark on the leaves. It happens quietly, months before you even notice anything is wrong. Reason 6: winter cold damage next year's buds. This is the one that confuses people the most. Because everything can look perfectly healthy in spring, and yet summer arrives with barely any flowers. Most gardeners assume something must be wrong with the soil, the fertilizer, or the watering. But the real damage may have already happened back in winter, on a single unusually cold night. Remember reason 1: many hydrangeas form next year's flower buds in late summer, then carry them through winter, tucked inside the stem tissue like a package waiting to be delivered. Those buds are more sensitive to cold than the rest of the plant. A hard, unexpected frost, even one bitter night, can kill the buds while leaving the stems and roots completely fine. The plant survives. The flowers just never had a chance. That's why a hydrangea can look green, leafy and healthy, and still bloom free. The damage isn't visible from the outside. It happened invisibly, months earlier. The fix, in colder climates, protect buds before the first hard freeze. A loose mound of mulch or leaves piled over the base, or a breathable burlap wrap around the whole plant, can buffer against sudden temperature swings. If you're in a genuinely harsh winter climate, look for reblooming varieties that flower on both old and new growth. They're far more forgiving. The plant wasn't broken this spring. It was decided last winter. We've covered light, water, feeding, and cold. But there's one last piece that quietly ties all of them together, and it's usually invisible unless you actually get your hands in the dirt. Reason 7: compacted or poor soil. Here's a question most people never think to ask. How easily does water actually move through your soil? Most gardeners assume soil is soil, dig a hole, plant the hydrangea, done. But soil that's compacted, heavy clay, or full of construction debris behaves almost like concrete to a root system. Water sits on top instead of soaking in. Roots hit resistance and simply stop expanding. Nutrients from your fertilizer never even reach the root zone because they can't travel through packed soil. Think of compacted soil like a hallway that's too narrow for anyone to walk through it. Doesn't matter how much food you deliver to the front door if there's no path to get it to the rest of the house. The plant can be sitting in perfectly good fertilizer and moisture and still act starved, simply because its roots can't access any of it. The fix: loosen the surrounding soil a foot or two beyond the plant's base, mix in compost to improve structure, and keep adding organic mulch on top. It breaks down over time and continuously improves the soil beneath it. This isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing relationship with your soil. Good soil isn't a background detail. It's the delivery system for every other fix in this video. Here's the thing I want you to walk away with. Your hydrangea almost certainly isn't suffering from all 7 of these at once. Usually it's just one, maybe 2, quietly working against it while everything else is doing fine. So don't try to overhaul everything in your garden this weekend. Pick the one reason that sounded the most familiar, the one where you thought, wait. That's exactly what I've been doing, and just fix that one thing. Hydrangeas are far more resilient than people give them credit for. Remove the one obstacle that's actually in the way, and you'll likely see the difference by next season, sometimes even sooner. If this helped you finally understand what your hydrangea has been trying to tell you, subscribe, because there's a lot more hiding in plain sight in your garden, and I'll keep uncovering it, one plant at a time.